Your bio says you moved from Chile to the Bay Area in 1995?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do you think spending a good chunk of the beginning of your life in an area where a lot of artists were silenced affected your need to want to tell stories?
Yeah, growing up in Latin America, I grew up in like 8 different countries in Latin America. We moved around a lot. And I was always surrounded by people who were exiles from Chile, people whose stories were silenced. It was dangerous to tell your truth. And I've realized more and more as I grow older that that's definitely my main motivation, is to tell stories that don't fit into the mainstream, that challenge the mainstream, and that are from voices who are usually pushed back or silenced. And yeah, I didn't realize at the time, but a lot of being an exile and fighting against a regime that's trying to silence you, storytelling is kind of therapy. Storytelling is, a means of survival and a means of organizing. And so for me, filmmaking is that. I grab onto that, and every project I work on, it has to address the society we live in, has to address people that are at the margins, and it has to be used as a tool to change things.
Well, I know you've done documentaries on different journalists, I think, and then Pedro Guerrero, the photographer. So in an age where now everyone can tell a story and it's almost encouraged, and everybody's supposed to be a quote-unquote influencer, in whatever their little niche is, how is that for you, knowing you grew up around a lot of people that were fearful of saying anything? How does that work in your mind?
It's interesting because my family is still nervous about sharing their story. Like for my parents, it's even hard to say what they went through. And so sometimes, even now in an interview, I have this weird, like, subconscious barrier sometimes to be fully open about what you've been through. And so in filmmaking, when you interview people, I really understand that when you're interviewing somebody and you're doing documentaries, you're almost like having a very vulnerable moment, and you have to really appreciate that, value that, and respect that. And the same thing in fiction. Our project, where the North Pole and different projects I've worked on, you're telling real people's stories. The North Pole is about real people that we know in our community. And so you have to really acknowledge that could be something very vulnerable, that could be something very intimate, and that you're exposing it to the world. And that's your responsibility to do it right. And I think that relationship to truth and to personal history is something that I'm very careful about and respectful about. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, yeah, absolutely. This is a little more of a lighter question. A movie that you were embarrassed to admit that you love, The Princess Bride?
Yeah. How did you find it out?
One of our interns.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I rarely allow myself to watch something just for fun, but I think it was really fun and well made and memorable. I mean, Inigo Montoya, even watching that movie before I knew English fully, like, I remembered him, and he was like stuck with me. And if a movie can do that, I think it's a big success.
But as a filmmaker, you say you don't see that many films?
I don't.
Why is that?
I think 2 hours of your life is a long time to spend doing anything. And so I don't consume film in that way, or TV or streaming. I like playing soccer. I like hanging out. I like doing other forms of art. I like spending time with real people. And so I actually have a lot of friends. I trust their taste and I know my taste. And once I hear like a few solid recommendations about something, I'll go and watch it. There's obviously certain things that I have my eye on, and like, anything that comes out of the Bay, I'm gonna watch regardless. Anything that has controversy and people are like, oh, and it deals with social justice, even if most people hate it, I'm gonna watch it because I have to have an opinion. But most things that are like, oh, that was cool, I'm not gonna watch it. Like, why? So I'm pretty picky, I guess. And it has to move me, it has to inspire me. And so if I'm gonna learn something, I definitely wanna watch it. And if it's a commentary on something I care about. then I want to have a discourse with it, you know?
So why the North Pole? Why you launched a crowdfunding campaign or two? This is your second series, is it?
Second season for the North Pole.
Okay.
I definitely think it fulfills all my requirements to watch it. It's going to make you think. It definitely has a stance. And I feel like almost anybody can learn something from it. And it's based on real people's experience in our town in Oakland, but it's very relatable to a lot of cities in this country. I mean, it's kind of like a symbol of an experience that's happening a lot in the country, you know?
Did you see something similar happen growing up in Chile or whatever area you grew up, different years?
I know gentrification wasn't a thing I grew up with in Latin America, but definitely, you know, at the core of gentrification is a class issue. That's definitely at the core of my experience in Latin America, you know, and in the world. And calling it what it is, you know, it's a class struggle, is something that nobody says in the show, but in my ideology, that's what's happening. It's gentrification is a green issue, and rich people in the Bay, San Francisco being one of the richest cities in the world, and how that starts affecting the surrounding areas and folks who don't have access to that capital. That experience is worldwide. And then, you know, our second season is about an immigrant. It's about an undocumented immigrant. And that story is based on a friend of mine since high school who actually used to lie to us. He said he was Puerto Rican. And it took him like 10 years to reveal that he was actually Salvadorian. And so, you know, and I've seen him go through his life with struggles who at the time I didn't understand why, but, you know, he wanted to be a fireman, he wanted to be an airline pilot, and he was never able to achieve that, you know. I was on the first plane he flew, small little Cessna, and it was scary. But that experience is similar to in my childhood. I was surrounded by exiles, which are in essence people who are forced to immigrate. And yeah, those experiences of feeling like you don't belong and you're not accepted and you have to hide who you are is definitely part of like my family's history, my community. And a close friend of mine who we use as an inspiration. It's a loose inspiration, but we use it as an inspiration for Benny, the main character.
Whose idea was it to begin writing the show?
It was initially me, Josh Healy, and Darren Colston got together. I mean, me and Josh had been working on a handful of other projects that were kind of one-offs, dealing with, you know, we had one with Boots Riley about a climate justice march that occurred. We did one for that. We did another one dealing with immigration. So they were all kind of one-off pieces, you know. We did one against fracking, attacking Jerry Brown in a nice way. And but we kept talking about, let's do something bigger, you know, let's get into characters, let's tell a longer story. And so we all had that motivation. So the three of us got together, went on a little mini retreat, and just started brainstorming and coming up with characters and ideas and planning out what would be this world. And that's where it came out of.
Would you write on your own and then bring it back to the two other gentlemen and say?
No, the first season was the three of us brainstorming together a lot. Josh was definitely the lead writer, and that meant that we would all brainstorm, and then he would go and chop things down, and then I would tell him he was wrong, and then he would tell me otherwise, and that's, you know, that's how we created the show and different characters. And the second season, Darren became just a producer, and we brought on the leads, two of the leads, Dante Clark and Reina Amaya. And then it became this 4-person room, and same thing, Josh being the showrunner, and then the 4 of us just, you know, getting creative together.